Alrighty, we can get started. It's good to be with y'all. Thank you for coming in for this last session of the day. My name is Varsha, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Offstream, and we help biochar producers do turnkey carbon credits. So I won't talk too much about what we do, but I spend a lot of my time day to day working with producers early in their journey towards developing carbon credits. Some of them are operating biochar production already, others are not. So actually it would be helpful before we get started to just get a sense of the room. So if you are actively producing biochar today, can you raise your hand? All right, we have 3 folks over here. Hello. If you are hoping to produce biochar in the next 12 months, can you raise your hand? Okay. If you if you have something else interesting, raise your hand and actually tell me what your story is. Like, what brings you two here? Do you not want to share?
Oh, I raised my hand with the already.
Oh, you already produce biochar. Okay, so everyone here either already does, I think, or will in the next 12 months. So hopefully this is helpful for you. I know this is a long title, but really what we wanted to talk about today was how we've seen and how our folks here have differentiated their projects in the carbon credit space through the concept of co-benefits, which have historically sounded maybe soft, but are actually quite quantifiable and can really differentiate and help folks garner premium pricing on their credits. So I will hand it over to the rest of my panelists to do intros, and then we'll jump in. Stebin, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hello, my name is Stebin Horne. I got a company that I'm the president of called EcoX. We're located in Fort Worth, Texas, but our project is a poverty eradication franchise development and rewilding program in Otarawango, Namibia. So we do all of our work in Southern Africa and look forward to talking to you guys about that today.
Hey everyone. So my name is Zarikos. I work for Lympha, which is a CDR-focused finance company. We're looking to help biochar and other CDR removal projects to essentially gain financing in the early stages, and also to help them with commercialization of their credits, whether that's through spot sales or offtake agreements in the long term. Look forward to sharing more with you guys today.
Hello everyone, so my name is Timothee Dulac. I work for Puro.earth as an account director. I help suppliers get certified with our methodologies, and especially today, the biochar methodology. Let's get this thing started.
Okay, so here's a little bit of a roadmap for what we're going to cover. We have 3 rounds of questions that I'm going to ask our panelists about. I'm going to try to ask them really hard questions, but if I didn't succeed, please keep your questions in mind. About an hour in, so 4:30-ish, we'll do Q&A. That can go as long as we want, and then we have an interactive activity after where we're going to ask y'all to maybe bring forth some of your ideas, and our panel here will give you their perspective on how to best position your projects. So that is our agenda. And basically, before we go into the specific questions, I just wanted to start with some definitions that I think could be helpful. So as I mentioned in my intro, co-benefits are basically like positive side benefits that come from a project's activities. And biochar production and storage, specifically in agriculture, but also in building materials, is very naturally aligned with having co-benefits. And for many years, biochar was produced simply because of these co-benefits. So increasing agricultural yields or using a waste stream and potentially creating jobs. So when we use the word co-benefit today, we're specifically talking about that category of benefits. This is separate but related to the concept of a sustainable development goal by the United Nations, the UN SDGs. So the UN has defined a specific set of SDGs that projects can claim, and these are helpful because they're standardized, but they're also just a subset of co-benefits. They're not always mission critical, and so there's some overlap, so I just wanted to start with that definition as a starting point. Okay. So jumping in, we'll have these 3 rounds of questions. If you want if people feel strongly, I'll pause and we can potentially do some Q&A in between to keep it fun. But I'll start us off with a question for you, Tim. I just sort of defined it, but do you have any other definition of how you would describe a co-benefit versus an SDG? How would you position it to people from a registry standpoint?
No, I think you've summarized it well. The SDG is obviously linked to the UN framework. It's more of a broader framework that is accepted and understood by financiers and the world in general, where co-benefits are more linked to carbon removal projects, right, as positive outcomes like cleaner air. We're going to talk about this, etc. But yeah, I think you made the distinctions pretty good.
So some of the producers here I think might be Puro certified. Like, why would a producer work with Puro to actually get verified for a sustainable development goal? Can you talk about what that process would look like and maybe what the rationale might be?
So at Puro, basically what you can actually certify is the SDG. That's one thing that comes with your certification. It comes with a little bit of a premium of 2.5% of your service fees. And basically the SDG can be asked by a buyer, an investor, and it's our role to then verify it. At Puro, basically what we do is that we allow you to take an SDG, take one criteria in this SDG and say, I'm going to claim this sub-criteria, basically, in order to get the certification done. So this is pretty new with Puro. We've been doing it for like now a year. And the SDGs help make the co-benefits a little bit more tangible and verified, audited by a VVB as well. So I think SDGs is more about like the global legitimacy, and the co-benefits is more like project level things. And at Puro, we certify only the SDG, but we talk a lot about your co-benefits. It's part of your listing, it gets verified during the audit, etc. Sure, we'll get in more details of the difference and the granularity of this after.
Yeah, thank you. Alex, I'm curious so you look at transactions a lot, right? How are co-benefits coming up in the work you're doing?
I think they're very relevant. I think as the CDR space has matured, obviously we're getting more and more projects that are also claiming to now be high integrity. So as a method of differentiating between the projects that they decide to either purchase or invest in, you have to look at other factors, and that's where really the co-benefits and SDGs also come into play. I would also say that not only from a buyer's perspective, but also particular lenders that are familiar with CDR and also in sustainability will be sometimes linking certain financing based on a number of SDGs or co-benefits that you're meeting. And I think one other thing to mention is that if any of you were watching the fireside chat with Microsoft earlier, they were emphasizing the importance on having additional revenue streams besides carbon credits and biochar. So certain projects that are also generating electricity or having other kind of impacts that can be tangible to the community or to the economy should be noted.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to how you know they're real. Like, I think we should definitely leave this conversation with more clarity on that. But before I go too deep into that, Stebin, you're producing, you're claiming co-benefits. When did you learn what this concept of SDGs and co-benefits were, and then how did you determine which ones you believed applied to your project?
Yeah, well, for me to best be able to understand that, someone had to explain to me that it's like tequila and mezcals, right? Like all tequilas are mezcals, but not all mezcals are tequilas.
Have you been preparing this analogy?
That's just I've got a tequila craving. So basically, the point at the project level is for us to develop as many co-benefits as possible. But when it comes to measuring and looking at potential off-takers or people that are going to fund the project, they're going to be really focused on SDGs because they have just been in the marketplace, being discussed, being measured at an international level. So you really want to do as much good as possible. And look, for me, we were doing these things well before we got into biochar. For a little background, I have a charcoal company in Africa, and so we were in Namibia developing charcoal since the early 2000s, and our goal has been to remove the encroacher bush, create jobs, rewild the environment, return the water table back to where it should be, all of these things. And so as biochar came along and this additional benefits that were actually much more important in the world of biochar than it was in charcoal, it just was a natural fit for us. So we were kind of ahead of it, but it came to us, and we're thankful for that.
Okay, so is it fair to say you were doing some of the activities that now you're claiming sustainable development?
Absolutely.
Were
yeah.
you tracking that already, or what was that
No,
process?
we were not tracking it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was obviously a new layer that we
Right.
had to do. And so, and it wasn't required by us. I mean, it was a story we were telling, which I think that's a huge part of attracting investors and off-takers is the story. It's not just we produce biochar. And so I think that's a big compelling point that is really tied to the halo effect. I don't know if you guys know that in marketing, but the halo effect essentially says that if you've got two products that are equal in value, but there's something additional about one that does good, or has goodwill or additional benefit, it tends to draw the consumer to that like 90% of the time. And I think that's where these co-benefits fall into play in the world of biochar.
Well, it sounds like you were getting the halo effect, but so we actually worked with you on this, right? You sat down and you mapped everything you thought you could do against the full list of SDGs. Like, which ones felt like straight shooters? Like you could claim them credibly. Which ones felt maybe I don't know if I have the data, but I think I need to put some systems in place.
Yeah, 13, 5, 8, 7, and 1.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I've got notes up here. I was like, what SDG is that? So I'll tell you.
Tell us.
All right, obviously, so 13, we all have cheat sheets up here, is climate action, right? So obviously, if you're producing biochar, right, you're going to be qualified for that. And that actually, through Puro, is a given, right? So that you can check the box on that just from being in this business. For us, number 15 is life on land, okay? So we've got this massive problem in our area with the ecology and this encroacher bush. And so by removing this, it's called encroacher bush, but it's an invasive bush, but it's not invasive because it's endemic. It's supposed to be there. So by removing that, we will affect the life on land. We've got all sorts of evidence and studies from elephants coming back in to, cheetahs coming back in because they need that open space to catch their prey and all this kind of stories. Decent work. I mean, we're in an area where unemployment's around 65%. So we're creating jobs, and so that's obviously a big impact on that. Affordable energy, as you all know, a byproduct of, your paralysis and creating the biochar, that's kind of a given. And then no poverty. We're in a very, an area that has a ton of poverty. So, and it kind of goes on, but those are like really low-hanging fruit for us in some of our initiatives.
So are those the one you focus on now in your investor and buyer pitches, or are you tracking for the rest?
We're tracking a lot more of that, like gender equality, partnerships, like everyone at this table and standing up here as a partner of mine. Like, we've been blessed to be surrounded with Varsha and Lympha and Puro to kind of guide us, because we weren't measuring, we weren't doing the things to document, even though we had all the information, it just became a requirement. So as we've moved from an existing project that was doing good in the area that we work to actually wanting to scale and do more, then that's become kind of critical for us. And so there's others, but those are the ones that we know we could argue for and justify without much of a case.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I think it's better, my read, I know I'm the moderator, but we see a lot of projects, and I think it's better to have 5 or 6 or even 3 that are really quantified with a baseline, how your project impacted it, than go for like all of them, because people wonder for sure. So just a note. Alex, I was curious if you can speak to like co-benefits and how they're how they're shaping demand today. So, like, have you been tracking this for some time? How has that changed in your discussions with end buyers of credits in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
Well, just to say one thing on the previous point, which is that hyperbole kills plenty of deals, right? So you don't want to be the person that's overpromising and then not delivering. So going back to that point, I 100% agree that you want to just focus on the co-benefits and SDGs that you know you can prove and not overcommit, because the moment a buyer or a lender really sees that, they're just going to get completely disinterested in the project and not believe it's legitimate. In terms of what we look at when we're evaluating a project to work, I mean, again, a review by somebody like Puro is something that we would look at. Any kind of environmental studies, so Stebin was mentioning like life on land, any kind of natural studies of the impact in the local ecosystem is something that we would look at as well. But in terms of, you were asking about the kind of interesting co-benefits as a whole from the buyers?
No, just like, are they going to stay as something that buyers look for? Do you think it's more of a fad? How do you know they're going to stay?
Well, as supply increases, there's going to be a more unique approach to kind of finding which project I want to purchase from, which project I want to invest in. So all the projects at the end of the day to a similar level will be removing carbon and having a meaningful climate impact from removing CO2. But the question is, what other impacts are you having? Are you eradicating poverty? Are you giving equality to women? Are you creating jobs? What kind of impact are you having on the local ecosystem, both on land and on water? So it's really, in my opinion, the next level differentiator between having successful financing and purchasing versus other projects. Because at the end of the day, supply is growing. More and more projects are finding profitable ways to conduct business in CDR, especially in biochar. So you have to basically change your scope and have an extra value added. So what is that value added going to be? And since we're in a sustainability field, it's going to be co-benefits and SDGs.
Yeah, one thing I heard from folks, it's a little bit getting to round 3, which is about buyer psychology, but if you'll indulge me, especially in the world of carbon avoidance credits, I think co-benefits were looked at a lot. You are working a lot with buyers now who are shifting into carbon removal procurement from avoidance, right? Are you seeing that that is driving any of this, the surge, or is it totally unrelated?
I think it's mixed. I think the buyer psychology and the financing psychology are not exactly synonymous. I think there's definitely different levels of diligence in certain areas. I think if you're looking mostly from a buyer's perspective, you're going to be really hammering home the scientific and technological due diligence and making sure that you're getting deliveries and that your technology functions. From a financing perspective, they're going to be looking way, way more into the financial viability of the project long term and making sure that it's an investable project and seeing the credits as kind of like a financing tool for that. So hope that answers the question there.
Maybe I'll insert, when I spent a lot of time speaking to buyers on this topic back in 22 and 23, and some of what I heard from them was like buying carbon credits was optional. It was risky. If there was a co-benefit that was quantified, it protected their downside and it helped them, you know, in case there were like carbon quantification claims that couldn't be backed up, to have other claims. And do you see that?
Yeah, well, one thing I will add that I think sometimes people lose perspective of is that a lot of these corporate buyers, they're not only, let's say, having corporate responsibility, like social responsibility from carbon removal, right? They have other initiatives that they're looking for. So if your project is able to meet other kind of CSR-looking initiatives that they have going, that's something that definitely would align with them, because you're kind of meeting a juncture of different initiatives that they're trying to support. So I think the co-benefits really provide an extra level of synergy with those buyers who are trying to identify a good fit for their budget.
Yeah, thank you. Tim, one more question for you. Obviously you work at Puro, but if you sort of wear your Puro hat and sort of just wear your Tim hat, like what role do you think registries need to play? Like, does everyone need to have a registry validating their SDGs, or no?
So that's a really good question. Maybe I'll put on my Tim hat instead of my Puro hat for this one.
Okay.
I think co-benefits, you always need to track it, and you always need to reassure a buyer of what you're doing and actually like having the metrics to prove what you're doing. SDGs is a little bit different, and I think it's dependent of if your financer or your actual buyer needs it or not. It's more of a broader certification, so it varies with the buyers. Like some of them require a certain SDG to be linked to their own reporting, others don't. So yeah, but if I put on my Puro hat, yes, please do certify your SDGs if you can.
When you say everyone should track their co-benefits, you imply, and I know we've talked about with Stebin, like low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. What are the low-hanging fruit that biochar producers in this room should be tracking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the number one that comes to mind is jobs created. Always keep track of it. Look at who you're hiring as well. Is it native communities? Is it people from the local region? Is there a high unemployment rate in the region as well? So that's one. We can also look at soil health and the amount of hectares you've helped recover if you're doing remediation projects, for example, as well. Another easy one I would say is how involved are you with women rights and women employment, etc. I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you have met one CEO and founder in the space of a biochar project, actually, who's a woman, I would like to meet her because I haven't met her today.
Yeah, I see one in the back. I think we have Jody from Bella Biochar. I don't know if she's in the room, but Stephanie in the back there.
And Jody was the first one, I think, in the world, right?
I think so too.
For that. So congrats to you. But I think we still need to see a lot more diversity in this space. So that's an easy one we can tackle early on, I think.
Just change your CEO.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm kidding. Sorry, guys. It's the end of the day. Okay. So you mentioned soil health. You mentioned job creation. Yeah, a way
Equal
to...
rights.
Gender, you said? Sorry.
Yeah, equal rights and
Equal
equal
rights.
opportunities for everyone. But maybe that links pretty well about maybe some tips that I can give, or like maybe it will start with things that we should not be doing. But do you want to save that for round two and making it real, maybe?
Yes, we're almost at round two. Does anybody have a burning question that you want to get in right now, or shall we continue? Okay, we'll take one question. Go ahead. You want to describe the mic? Oh, there we go. That's an easy one. Is it Tim and Alex?
I think it's this microphone.
Is it working? Oh, I better. We got to put it closer, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other audio or technical things? Okay. That was very easy. I appreciate that. That was a real layup. Oh, do you have a real question, Sam?
I do.
Okay.
I'm just curious about the tracking. Like, and maybe that's it, making it real. Maybe I'm premature in my question, but like, what does tracking SDGs look like? You know, like I've learned a lot about the MRV stuff, you know, when tracking like the LCA components, but I'm just curious about what that actually means and looks like. But if you want to postpone
we can
me
talk
till
about
later, that's fine.
You can take it, Tim, and then we'll move on in a second. Go ahead.
So actually, we're making it easy for you guys with Puro because we have predefined what you need to track for the most common SDGs for biochar projects. We have criterias, examples of what you should be tracking in order to fulfill those requirements, etc. And I think we have currently 6 or 7 SDGs that are mapped out, and basically all you need to do is take them, plug them in, make sure that you follow the rules, and you can get them certified. When it comes to co-benefits, which is not officially verified by the VVB or the auditor, actually, it's another process, and I think we're going to tackle it right now in the next round.
Yeah, we can give some more examples of what to track, but at a high level, Sam, it's like what is your baseline, and then identifying a couple of different like large-scale surveys you're going to do, but we can go through it. Okay, so any parting thoughts from folks on why SDGs matter? Okay, we have a quick takeaway here, but I would say in general, like I don't think we're yet at the point where carbon removal credits are a commodity, but in a world where there's lots of biochar carbon removal hopefully coming online in the next few years, not only do they differentiate projects, I think they help people match well. Like we'll talk a little bit about geography, I think, in biopsychology, but folks want to feel good about the products they buy across the board. You know, like Stebin said. And so this is something that often I see companies kind of really look at when they're purchasing to try to build internal buy-in. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll move forward to making it real. So do one of you want to start with maybe a specific co-benefit you're tracking and like how you set that up? Maybe Stebin, is that something?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Maybe walk us through for Sam and for other folks in the room. How'd you pick it? What did you start to do to begin the tracking, and what have been some of the challenges?
Sure. Well, again, I think that decent work and job creation is the very easiest way for anybody in this room to get started, right? Because you're going to monitor that. You're going to keep up with who you're employing, their time with you. Gender will be a focus of that, part of that conversation. We do, in that process, we manage all of our training so that you can be like, that's kind of like work uplift. Like you're not just giving them a job, you're going to train them and give them educational tools to hopefully scale out of whatever we've hired them for. I mean, where I'm at in Africa is such a difficult situation. For you who aren't familiar with Southern Africa, for typically like blue collar or low wage jobs, lots of times you have to get to a city center to get that employment, okay? And so we have a focus to keep the family unit together in where we're at, because what will happen is one of the family members will leave and go to Johannesburg or Windhoek or Walvis Bay or wherever, Durban, and they'll be gone for like 10 months and they'll send money home, and then they come back, and for a month or two they'll spend some time with their family, they'll see their child, they'll visit with their mother or father, because it's usually the whole family in there together. And so what we like to do is try to hire the entire family. So if we hire someone for a position, male or female, and they're married, we like to hire their spouse so that we keep them in the area. And it would be difficult to do that in the United States because of the cost associated with that. Where we're at, that's not as much of a challenge, and we can find work and opportunity. But I think that's a great place to start. And then providing that layer of education really shows an emphasis not just on I'm hiring you to do a job, I'm actually hiring you to give you an opportunity. And so I think that's something that we focus on.
Do you track, do you basically track the job, so for job creation, that's easy, you kind of know how many people you hired, but is there anything else you're tracking about your hiring practices that help you with this claim?
There's a lot of things that happen with work compliance, retention. There are governmental standards in Namibia, just like you would find here, for making sure that we're complying with all the regular regulations, but then we kind of want to go above and beyond that. And I think some of the times that's where the story unfolds. So if we've got a job creation story, or like we just built this school, and it's a kindergarten, but we do continuing ed and additional training after work hours so that someone can learn a trade. So maybe we've hired them to be out like harvesting biomass, but they have the potential to come in and learn how to work a certain piece of equipment or work on the solar side or whatever. And so tracking that stuff, I think, is very valuable, because then you can see them move from the initial position you hired them for to all of a sudden moving into management or scaling into a different part of the business. And I think that's when people, potential off-takers or people wanting to finance a project, hear that story, that typically really warms up the conversation to where you can get it across the finish line. Definitely.
Alex, I'm curious, when you're reviewing a co-benefit claim, because you're doing an internal review before you bring it to like a corporate buyer, how do you figure out whether it's the documentation is good enough? Like, what are you looking for? You can pick, we could do job creation, or one that's obviously really popular is like soil health improvement. Like, you can pick any SDG you think of.
Yeah, I mean, to mention the two that you said, right? Job creation, it's very simple, right? I mean, you just look at the jobs they are creating in the region. You can look at statistics that outline the unemployment in the area. You can obviously look at verify this claim basically for the family unit and keeping it together. But then also, I think in terms of other criteria like soil health and things like this, there are studies that we do look for in our. We essentially aggregate a data room that has a strict list of criteria that we look for, and yeah.
Do you ask the producer to share that data, or are you doing that research on their behalf?
So it's a mixture of both. Initially, we ask for data from the developer because we like to see what we're working with and to see how upfront they are with giving us data. I think that's usually a good sign of how good a fit that is, because some developers have not been, and then it usually doesn't work out. But then we do our own independent research and verification, because again, we do like to trust everyone that we work with, but as part of our responsibility, we need to verify that ourselves. Obviously, it can be a little bit more difficult if you're working with projects outside the U.S., but yeah, we do both.
Okay. Is there a gold star, like best practice, your dream co-benefit data room? What's in it?
You mean exactly with what documents are in there?
No, like, so for soil health, for example, when we work with producers, we suggest that they get a baseline, like an economic, we have a survey we suggest that they run where we basically ask them to ask growers in their region like 5 questions, and then we prompt them to do it again at the end of the next year. And that's really helpful because it's the same set of growers, it's data that's meaningful for them. And so I like to think that that's gold standard, but I'm curious if is that the case? Like, do you like to see direct evidence from the producer, or does it sounds like you're flexible, you'll take some of that, you'll take research as well. Like, what's the dream, for people here who are early in the
ideally is everything, right? I mean, the more we have, the easier it is to relay the message, and the more confidence we have in the project. There's no downside to having more information. The more we have to really review, the better. So yeah, I would say if we have a combination of a very elaborate data room of verifiable evidence from them, that's great. But then to also have kind of third-party verification outside of what we have between us and the developer, I think is also very important, and also very important for the buyers, right? Because who are they to only trust us? Not to say it that way, but they need some kind of proof from a not vested party in the ecosystem.
So when you say third-party verification, are you referring to a Puro certification or a standalone audit from some other auditor?
Puro is a good start. It really depends on what the buyer's standards are. And I think this is something also to really emphasize, is that there are different types of buyers in the market. Premium buyers alone is a subset, who are usually very, very interested in the co-benefits and SDGs of a project. There are others who, they won't even go this far and really look at co-benefits, right? But if we're talking about premium buyers, they tend to be pretty diligent when it comes to this. An example would be like Microsoft or any of the large buyers. They're really looking at every single thing, and they will even do site visits. They will go out there and actually check to make sure that everything you're claiming is legitimate. Because again, if you're going to pour a lot of money in, either from a financing perspective or structure a long-term offtake, you need verification that everything that's been claimed is legitimate.
Thank you. Tim, do you have a point of view on like best-in-class tracking? So maybe for life on land, or even like water, any of the other co-benefits, one that you're familiar with, is there one where are you looking at the purest?
Yeah, I'm looking at the framework right now. We have multiple requirements for each of those.
Yeah, maybe pick one and talk through it so that the audience can.
So for example, let's use target 7, which is by 2030 for the SDG. By 2030, increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. Okay, so the quantitative metric that we need to see is megawatts of renewable energy produced in a reporting period. The methodology that can be applied to is biochar or BECS. And then you have multiple requirements on how we should be doing this. So it's like paragraphs. I won't go too much in the details. But for example, one of them is that an increase in energy production related to the baseline is happening because of this project. So that's one of the requirements. So we try to make it easy for you. It's SDGs englobe a lot of requirements. It's usually 2 or 3 requirements within the SDG certification. But yeah, each SDG has really detailed requirements based on the approach you should be taking. But to answer your point, Varsha, I think the best data recording you can do, or the best data collection you can do, is just to start early. It doesn't matter what SDG you want to claim, what co-benefit you want to claim. Start as early as you can to track. And so if there's one thing like I actually want people to come out of this panel discussion is track as early as you can, even if it seems a little bit like silly data at first. Data is very, very important in this space. So yeah.
Maybe I'll add, when you're tracking, the way I think about it is you want to track your baseline and then you want to track after. So the word co-benefit is vague. I think we have a list of some after this. So in these slides, you'll see some of the examples, and we'll sort of share what the metric would be for that co-benefit. And if you're not satisfied, come find me and we'll come up with another metric for you. But essentially, the way I think about it is pick a handful, track what the current state is, and then if you can track the future state, that does a lot for the project. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's new, right? You'll all agree. Like this space, the whole thing is new. The standards continue to change, and so it's possible like you will be forging a bit of a path forward for lots of other producers.
And I think like don't be afraid to start simply and like in a simple way, right? And as you're saying, baseline change over time, verifiable metrics, and you really touch on it. If you can bring a third party to attest the data is accurate, that's the best you can do. And I think very quickly is also we've been saying of what you should be doing, but let's quickly go over what you should not be doing. And Varsha, you talked about it very clearly. It's do not overclaim. It's a red flag as a buyer or an investor if you're claiming all 17 SDGs and you're not able to give proof to that, right? Do not use anecdotes. Do not say, for example, oh yes, I've delivered 1 ton of biochar to the native community around me, so they're structurally involved in this project. That is not true. It's about making them fully part of the project in a structured way, right? So yeah, so a little bit of the don't do, it's don't go too broad and make sure you're able to back what you're saying with data.
Alex, I'm back to you for one more question. Can you describe a trend, like a deal that you've been working on that you saw SDGs move the needle? You can be vague a little bit about the people, but as much detail as you can share about the structure, that would be
I want to
amazing.
understand what you mean by move the needle. I mean, you're saying that that was the difference maker with working for them, or?
Yeah, tip the scale. Maybe they were considering a few different projects for credits. They picked one because of SDGs. I think that we talked about this, so hopefully I'm not totally throwing you a curveball.
Yeah. There are definitely, so I will be vague, but there are definitely a couple projects that we've had discussions with that when we brought the SDG argument to the table, it definitely changed their perspective. I can definitely say there was one project that we are currently working with that essentially the financing is coming through a fund that is exclusively focused on milestones of hitting certain SDGs after a certain number of years. So very clear, right? That's the main criteria for actually having access to those funds. So that's something that I think it definitely made a difference when we found a project that really, I mean, they hit quite a few SDGs. So if they didn't have that access to that financing would simply not be possible. They were looking for a minimum of 5 to 6 SDGs that were hittable within 5 years. And we were able to, start aggregating that data and presenting it. And if they, again, were not confident in that position, then that would not even have been an option. So be open-minded as to thinking that a lot of people, when they look at finance, they think it's only about the financial viability of a project or very simple kind of transactional related data, but this is just not the case. There are definitely sources of funds and finance out there that are directly linked to co-benefits and SDGs. And they actually give, I would pretty bluntly say, favorable terms of finance.
Yeah. Can you share maybe like who are these types of funders and like why do they care about SDGs?
So one, I can explain the structure of it. Essentially, it's a donor-advised fund, which, if you guys don't know what that is, it's essentially a fund that nets a lot of assets from wealthy individuals or people that would donate to foundations traditionally. But foundations traditionally have a minimum spending requirement per year. And they also usually spend a lot of money on other things, galas and things like that. And a lot of the like the donees essentially were getting very upset that they were not seeing tangible impact from their donations. So they said, essentially, we're not doing that structure anymore. We're going to create this fund that also, yes, does give tax incentives, similar to donating to a foundation. But essentially, the money is then pooled and organized and utilized for a project whenever it comes to be, right? So if someone comes to them with a great idea, and they see the financial viability and they see the impact that it's going to be having, they can just allocate that money whenever they want. They don't have a certain time frame where that money needs to be spent to a certain percentage. So those kind of funds definitely, if they're structured like that, I'm not saying that all donor advised funds are linked to SDGs. Some are and some aren't. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely important to keep in mind that if you're not able to secure financing from a traditional lender, that these solutions exist. And so I think it goes back to the whole making it real part. It's not just about telling a story. It actually can be the difference between accessing capital at a very crucial stage of your project.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was a big unlock for me. But I think in carbon and around biochar and agriculture, there are these are themes that correct me if I'm wrong, but we see like many foundations and donor advised funds like interested in because of, do you want to share more?
Yeah, I'll just say that when we're talking about a space like this where you have a lot of sustainability related kind of metrics, you're going to see a lot of these funds out there that will be giving favorable terms for capital for CDR. So that's definitely something to keep a lookout for. And again, I will reiterate what I think we've all said, and Tim especially, hyperbole will kill that. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be the project out there that's overpromising, saying they're going to be achieving all these great things, and then not, because at least definitely in the lending space, you're dead. You're not going to get any kind of interest again, because it's a red flag. It's a heavy trust-based industry. The number one thing is, even if at the beginning you have to underclaim by saying things that are for sure, like the low-hanging fruit you guys have mentioned, definitely don't overclaim, because there's no real recovery from that.
Fair, thank you. Wow, I feel that got real. I'm like stressed thinking about that.
Yeah, let me add something to that. So for us, like this is such a nascent market that you have to. The reason that there are so many layers of third parties verifying, or MRV, or standards, or what have you, is because this thing evolves so quick. And so, like, not only should you go to Puro and look at their standards of what their requirements are, others, but then it might be that you guys, in your own tracking methodology or whatever, create a new pathway to a standard. So, I think that's where we're at in this world. But one of the things that we did was in order to mitigate risk for our partners involved, because I think that's a big part of the third-party verification is risk mitigation, is to associate other groups. So like we're in conversations with like a university to come in and actually deploy grad students to do a study that in and of itself, they need that value. They need that study for their own work and white papers and whatever, but it justifies independently our claims, right? And then we're working with Eco Training that did some rewilding in the Masai Mara up in Kenya. So we took that blueprint and their plan that was already established and verified, and we just layered it over our program. So we can say, look, we're not just coming up with this has already worked. And we're going to do that here, and we've got their oversight, we've got this group here. And so again, it's more layers, but it's not necessarily one that's creating an additional cost. You just find ways that they can benefit from being associated to your project the way that you can benefit from being associated to what they're doing.
Yeah, so, and you're working with Georgia too, right?
Yeah.
Is that is that the university you're talking about?
Yeah, it's Jim Beasley. Yeah, he does a human wildlife interaction conflict, and it's really the whole story because in our poverty eradication franchise, one of the bigger problems that we have is access not only to create jobs, but to give these people food and education and all those things. But without the food, next thing you know, they're going out, they're setting snares. You try to rewild the black rhino, they poach a rhino, they get arrested, family falls apart. This whole, it's like the human wildlife interaction where we're at is such a big part of the story that And to their point, like, for someone like me that thinks that I can just claim all these things because I think that's our goal. Like, our goal is to do that, but you can't stand on those things for the fear of greenwashing or claiming too much. And this whole industry has already been bruised with that, and it's almost like we're getting a second go at it. And so being careful and documenting and getting in front of this thing and knowing that you're creating your story as you do it it's a great opportunity. But I do think that is a big differentiator in where we're at in this marketplace.
Yeah, I really like the idea of bringing in other institutions. So for lots of folks in the U.S., I know folks in the Central Valley do a lot of work with Davis, UC Davis. Are there any folks in the room who are doing research on this topic? Okay, hi, again. You're in the Central Valley. Yeah, well, anywhere else? Okay, well, I definitely have seen a lot of these partnerships. I think they're helpful and usually win-win, so thank you for sharing that, Stebin. Okay, I have one final set of questions, and then we'll switch to Q&A, but just a takeaway on this section, so to speak. Sam, we can talk more if you want after, but key takeaway is, like, these claims only work with the right proof, and less is more. There's no perfect, like, silver bullet for what to track, but maybe the takeaway is, like, just put your thinking cap on. There's like 4 or 5 different ways to baseline and track what's going on moving forward. Okay, last session, I think I have around 10-ish, 15 minutes till Q&A, and then we can go from there. But buyer psychology, our favorite topic. I guess, Tim, we haven't heard from you in a little bit, but you speak to buyers a good amount in your role. Are there specific co-benefits that you're seeing that they're gravitating towards? And if so, like, why?
Interest in the buyer's eyes, like, what are they interested in? That's
Yeah,
what you mean?
which ones carry more weight? Is that a thing even?
So I'm going to talk on America's perspective because that's my region, right? I think the number one that I'm seeing is native community involvement. The carbon credit market has done a bad job previously at involving those people. For example, in forestation project in the Amazon, there were a lot of controversies that we didn't ask the native communities how we should make this happen, and I think we've learned from that a lot. And a lot of the Canadian projects, because I'm based in Canada, a lot of the Canadian projects that I'm helping, a lot of the US projects that I'm helping with, if there's a way you can work with native communities around you by hiring them, donating your biochar on a consistent basis, or any way you can involve a tribe council, etc., that carries a lot of weight in the buyer's eye, in my opinion.
In the U.S., is there an equivalent, or is that coming up here as well?
It's up there too in the U.S. I would say. I think it's really what sometimes sets you apart from a project that's like has all the other co-benefits lined up, and one of them is involving like a native council or something, and that gives you the edge a little bit. And then in terms of other co-benefits in the U.S. specifically, I would say that maybe one thing that people don't talk enough about is like the wastes that can be reused, right? And in the U.S. specifically, we have a lot of sawmills that produce some kind of, people call it waste, other people call it low value feedstock, etc. But I think there's a clear opportunity in the U.S. based on the current landscape and structure for like using those waste byproduct and turning them into something even better, like biochar is doing. And I think, just to wrap up here on the buyer psychology, I want to take a step back for everyone. And we haven't mentioned that at the beginning, and it's my bad, I should have mentioned it, but biochar has the most co-benefits at every single carbon removal pathway that exists right now. If we look at every single other pathway, so let's start with DAC, you're capturing carbon out of the air, maybe you're employing people, but that stops there. You don't have like native communities, soil benefits, etc. So I think when you're selling your biochar projects to a buyer, let's keep that in mind, that co-benefits, SDGs, is what set biochar projects to the top and as a real competitive advantage compared to the other pathways.
Can we actually talk about sawmills and the waste valorization a little bit more? Probably there's lots of people in the audience that are looking at sawmill waste. Am I right to say that's a co-benefit, not an SDG, like waste
Correct.
repurposing? What would you want to see them track around baseline versus, like, basically, is it just the baseline of where it was going and what they're doing now? Or how would you frame that if you were trying to?
Yeah, like this is obviously an ongoing topic too in the community, because it sometimes involve the principle of leakage too. So if you're taking someone's waste, was he burning it to basically heat his house, and should he go get new wood somewhere else to actually do it instead? So we have to take into consideration the whole picture out of all of this. I usually say you are very, very safe if your sawmill is PEFC certified or FSC certified. It's a big reassurance for the buyer and for the certification company as well. Yeah. Do you have a follow-up question on this?
No, it's okay. I know lots of folks don't have those certifications here, but I was less curious about the carbon accounting and more about the co-benefit story. But you're basically saying, you know, I think wildfire management is actually potentially like an adjacent one. So we see a lot of folks taking wood that might even be part of an existing wildfire management scheme in forests, but chipped and left in those forests, which is not really much better than just leaving the logs whole in those forests. And so they're putting in the effort to collect that. And wildfire management is probably my vote for the top co-benefit in the U.S. right now.
That's a good one.
How many folks in this room are looking at that? All right, nice. Any questions on that? You want to sneak in here or save? Yeah, Sam, let's go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that related to would wildfire management be considered part of that life on land SDG?
What do you think?
I honestly, I think it's more linked. I actually touched on multiple because it's linked to clean air. That's one. Like, I don't know if you've been in Canada recently. I'm based in Montreal, but we're seeing more and more of those pink skies during the summer. And Montreal was the worst city in the world in terms of pollution because of those wildfires. So it touches on multiple SDGs. And I think the reality of it too, why it's such an important co-benefit in North America is because we're at lack of solutions to fight against those wildfires. Like in Canada, it takes the firefighters like 3 or 4 hours on a plane to actually reach the center of the fire to fight it so it doesn't reach other cities. So I think you're right, Varsha. This is like a huge one, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, I think.
Yeah, I think of the 17, Sam, Life on Land is the closest. Another one that's relevant to probably some folks in the room is around clean water. So I know we talk about biochar production for PFAS filtration and industry innovation and infrastructure on the building material side. Those are probably the three. But I haven't yet
Definitely
seen...
life on land, though.
Yeah.
It's so
Go ahead.
protecting from wildfires definitely, I think, could be a rewilding claim, you know, because that's such a huge part of it. And I don't know if Stephanie, she left, but one of the things we were even talking about, like from that perspective of rewilding, getting rid of that and protecting those ecosystems is critically important. And I think you could go historically back using the Forestry Service or whoever to establish baselines and then move that forward, because I mean it doesn't take much. Like, I mean, in Africa I have a lot of different endangered plants, flora, fauna that I could play on, but even here in certain areas, like even like the just like the woodpecker in certain parts of southern Florida or wherever, like you can find opportunities to help and work with groups in certain areas that you're at where they're trying to protect, you know, endangered species or plants or whatever, and then show how getting rid of that fuel and turning that into biochar could be a benefit. But again, it's all about layering in other people that would agree with you and make sure that your claim can then be justified, data proven, all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think of what Alex, what I'm going to share, maybe tying in Sam's question to Stebin's thought. So, when you're thinking about, should I fit this into an SDG like life on land, or should I just quantify this as a standalone co-benefit? I think it ultimately is like, what does your buyer care about? Are they a globally oriented organization that's going to track SDGs, or are they maybe like California or West Coast or really many states in the U.S. based with wildfire concern as something that they care about? Then you might go for the wildfire reduction co-benefit because that's their preference. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah, honestly, 100%. There's nothing more to say.
Wow.
Can I just say that from the co-benefit perspective, I think the onus is more on me to tell that story. But when it comes to like an SDG compliance based from a funder or from an off-taker, they're going to dictate that to you. They're going to tell you, I want this, and the way I want it is you're going to have to prove to me A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So, for me as a co-benefit, I'm going to be wanting to do all these great things, and I'm going to be carving that out and doing these things. But for an SDG, they're going to also tell you how you're going to report it to them and prove it. So.
Yeah. Are they? Like, has that come up in your buyer conversations, Stebin?
We've had some conversations around our projects, but what happens is they look across the spectrum and they see all the things we're doing. So it's a little bit different, but like if I'm in the North American market, which I deal with, I live in Georgia, guys, so even though I'm in Namibia a lot, but like we had Hurricane Helen come through and wipe out half of our state. And I know I've got so many friends that are going out of business. We had 3 pulp mills just closed in South Georgia, and it's crisis mode. And so, I think that the opportunities to find use for all this wood that's on the ground and generations of, potential income from timber wiped out, that there are real opportunities. I think the problem is at this point finding the right groups of funders and off-takers to tell that story and get things moving. But I do think that co-benefits is a huge part of that, and potentially SDGs. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Alex?
I think the only thing I would mention on top of that is that there's no like fixed blueprint, right, for certain SDGs that you need to hit. It's not like I have a laundry list of going to, or a shopping list going to the supermarket. It's like, okay, I got SDG 5, 7, 8. Like, it doesn't work like that. Some will look at the number of SDGs that you're hitting, but to say that specifically you need to hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for every single buyer, I think is just, 13 obviously, because we're talking about climate action. But other than that, I think it will really depend on who you're speaking to. And again, if the project is able to prove it and make a fit, great. If not, it's not like we're just going to make up SDGs just to make things happen, right? So sometimes there's a fit and sometimes there isn't.
Mm-hmm. Tim, do you have anything else you want to share about this? If not, we can go to our fun interactive activity.
No, I think I'm all good. Nothing to add.
Okay, perfect. So to round out buyer psychology, I guess it's just like know your buyer the way you're supposed to know your customer. Understand for them if their sources of funding or if they're accountable to other bodies that care about a specific thing. So in California, I know PG&E, for example, is very actively focused on wildfire reduction. I think in Colorado, my home state, there are counties. Sam, you're hopefully working with one that cares a lot about like wildfire mitigation. It's definitely a topic that's close to home for many people. Is there anyone with a burning question, or should we play impact match and then come back to Q&A? You want to go ahead? Yeah, let's do it. No, it's okay. Let's do your question. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
So related to even making it real, my company's working through carbon credits and in the idea of transparency and credibility. We're very interested in blockchain and how that might add value. And I'm curious, maybe this goes to Timothy, is there a premium that can be considered in the value of what we're doing if we use blockchain to map the carbon journey?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And blockchain is really like this. There are huge opportunities in this market regarding blockchain uses and how we can make it happen. When we think about the price of your carbon credits, it's mostly narrative based, and the co-benefits can add to this narrative, and it's maybe an exaggeration, but basically every co-benefit that you're able to document and you like really show the data for it, that can add $5 to your carbon credits every single time. So every time you're able to justify the co-benefits really well with the tracking, etc., through blockchain technology, for example, you can justify to the buyer your pricing. You can tell them, okay, like usually, like the cost is at 140, but I've implemented this and this and this, and that means that now it is worth X amount extra, maybe 10 euros or $10 extra. So that's really the way that I would look at it, is being able to justify even more why you may have your like a price increase based on the tools you're using and the justifications you're bringing.
Can I ask a follow-up? It's Tony, right? Okay, I met Tom last week, so okay, you're good. So what are you tracking on the blockchain? Like, is it co-benefit data or is it your production data?
Specifically, we're using blockchain now to look at the point of origin of where the carbon is manufactured, where the additionality is occurring in that manufacturing, to say we're creating an additional benefit, and then mapping it through blockchain so that it's this immutable digital record to show its resting place, that point of sequestration. Mm-hmm. And so it's validating that we actually did have biochar, here's the tonnage, and this is where it's sequestered, reducing any issue of greenwashing or even questioning the validation of our tonnage being sequestered.
Okay, so you're putting the data regarding biochar production, tracking, and end use on
So there's the data
ledger.
looks at travel, other things that might be considered in the credibility of the of the credit.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Alex, is Lympha still taking a blockchain angle? Do you want to talk about that at all? Okay, we can just skip.
We
it
are.
If you want.
That's something that we've been looking at. I'd love to discuss it further afterwards as well. But definitely anything that increases transparency in a historically not transparent market is valuable, right? This is not, and I know we mentioned commodities earlier.
It's not a commodity.
It's not, right? In the sense that the way it behaves, it has some characteristics of it, but it doesn't. And again, you don't have that really open exchange. You don't have openly or publicly accessible data to kind of have this free market of information that's accessible to everyone. And again, that's why a lot of buyers are skeptical when they speak with project developers, because they're thinking, maybe I'm getting a better offer. Maybe the price that I'm getting from one project is slightly lower, but I don't know why that is, why that translates, and am I still getting a good deal? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying $10 less per credit for another project. That doesn't mean that it's a good valuation of the credits that they're generating. So anything, especially blockchain, anything that really is able to enhance the transparency of the market is valuable, because that will also inject more liquidity into biochar as a whole, not only from purchasing but from financing. They'll be able to actually understand what that looks like better, so they know how to help those projects.
Yeah, go for it, Tim.
Yeah, that's well said, Alex. And I'll add on top of this that basically your narrative will open the door to the buyers, getting the buyers interested in your project, but it's the data and the transparency that will make you close those deals. So anything you can add in transparency and data that can reassure the buyer, that's how you're going to be successful.
We haven't talked about ratings, but also your question brought that up for me. I mean, Alex, let me know if you agree, but we're seeing that ratings aren't going to necessarily open maybe they will open a conversation if you're in a small pool of producers that has a carbon credit rating, but they definitely increase the price of your credits, right?
Yes. It again depends on the buyer. Usually ratings are buyer driven. There are some projects that will get ratings done because they want to show a more transparent storyline as to the actual integrity of their project. But again, you're going to have the same thing when you're looking at insurance, right? For insured credits, to basically kind of show that if an insurance company is willing to basically insure those credits, that you do have good integrity. So I think ratings and insurance are inherently tied in a way. There are some buyers that we've spoken to, and they basically, in not so polite words, said they don't care about ratings. And others who they say, like, if I'm going to either invest or purchase from a project, I insist that the project gets rated by either by any company or by X company. So it really, really depends. And it goes back to that whole, there's no one blueprint for all buyers. It really depends.
Anyone else have a question they want to chime in? Yeah. The gentleman in the back. Do you want to introduce yourself as well? Actually, it would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. I'm Abraham from Biochar. We develop projects in different parts of the world and been involved in lots of sales of credits and financing and forward. So maybe a couple of comments quickly, because I think a little bit controversial to what you've heard. We find that and really for the benefit of others who are having those discussions, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, is that the questions we get from buyers about SDGs and co-benefits have little to do with premium pricing. They have a lot to do with de-risking the project. So like, how much can they assess you as a project developer and the project on a forward basis, especially if they're doing a forward offtake? Absolutely agree that if you look at a spot contract, the SDGs might have an increased price, but often for high capex projects, like all of us are building in biochar, it's about trying to get that forward offtake, and therefore the assessments being done by the buyers are often de-risking. So you may argue it gets you a premium price. I'd argue you're getting a premium price because you're a biochar developer and you deserve it. The other one, a comment I'd say about ratings is like, we find that there's a lot of claims about this, is like the rated projects have higher prices, but my argument is projects that are higher quality tend to go get ratings, and so they tend to invest more in the project to then get their bona fides up. And then our experience with buyers is if they have internal due diligence capabilities, they don't require it because they feel they can do it themselves. But those buyers, and that's most buyers in the world, don't know the difference between a biochar removal credit and a red credit, like, to make a huge distinction. They tend to like the ratings because it provides them some sort of internal confidence for procurement purposes. Why did I do this? McKinsey told me to do it. Like, same thing. Why did I do it? B0 said it was okay, and Silvera said it was okay. So we think, we'd suggest all developers work with Silvera, work with B0. They're pretty amazing. They will help you quite early in a project to set yourselves up with everything that's being said here, and it does really complement like a Puro. They back Puro, like you've got good Puro credits, but by having another third party, it does just give them that slightly higher level of confidence. So they're my comments. The question I wanted to ask is about the pricing a little bit. Is like, we find that, and this is just a tip, like we always provide the short run marginal cost and the levelized cost of production to our buyers. And then we provide what we think the agronomic benefit is of the biochar in the certain setting we're in, and you can net out what the CDR price should be with a decent margin for yourselves as developers. So short run marginal cost is your cost of production less capex. Levelized cost of production, add in financing, add in capex, and that gives you two prices that provide a really compelling story if you're talking to a buyer on why the price is. What do you think you're going to get for biochar? Well, if you're doing broad acre crop versus intense horticulture, they've got two different biochar outputs. These are broad statements, but you're going to get a higher biochar price for the horticulture than you would for broad acre cropping. In that context, you can then go, well, it's the same project net, but I need a higher CDR price. And every buyer we've spoken to has been responding really, really well to that sort of, financial breakdown of why I need that price. But I was interested if you're seeing that, or like what other reference points you're seeing when you are trying to set the right price, because it is different. It isn't a commodity yet. Not every biochar price needs to be the same to generate the same return for the developer or the project participant. So I was interested in that pricing methodology.
Can I ask you one quick follow-up before we do your question? Are you directly selling to so you mentioned it's different whether a buyer has a diligence team in-house or not. Like, are you mostly talking to the sophisticated buyers who are very experience procuring carbon removal credits, or are you talking to folks who've never bought CDR before?
I'll talk to someone sitting on a bus. Like,
in this context, the way in the scenario you just described.
Yeah, I think it always starts at the top. You go to those who are most likely to pay the highest price. We all know who they are, but they've got a very, very high profit to emissions profile, and they're public and marketing themselves, so you all know who they are. There's 10 companies. And then go down from there. We spend a lot of time talking to, like, controversially, maybe for some, like oil and gas and coal companies in Australia. They've got a problem, and that problem is they need durable carbon removal to net off. They like biochar, like these groups like biochar. They don't like the idea of planting a tree. They understand like for like carbon abatement, and so we'll talk to anyone, but we start at the top, go down.
Okay.
We talk to the brokers, the intermediaries, talk to anyone.
Yeah.
There's always a bit of money, there's always a margin for someone to provide that arranger role.
Sure. Okay, so the question you asked, let me just make sure I got it, is essentially, this is your strategy. You talk to the carbon credit buyer pretty transparently about your levelized cost of production, and then you explain to them why the CDR price needs to be the way that it is. Have folks on the panel seen that works, or have you not tried that? How do you think that would go?
Well, all I want to say is, like, back in the days, 5 years ago, when I was a project developer at JECA, I was struggling to structure the pricing, and it was done a little bit, like, up in the air, right? And being able to, like, with experience, with the spot market experience that you're building, you kind of know where you're going to land at some point. But the only comment I want to say is I'm really glad the market has evolved, and we're able to justify now that pricing with real numbers, etc. So, yeah. But I'll let my co-worker...
Thank you. No, I agree. I do think that, again, it goes back to an earlier point that, yes, we've had improvements in the market. Yes, there's been more transparency. But in the general environment, there's still a lot of gray area as to exactly finding the right value for credits. And that's something that we also discuss with developers because there's bits and pieces of information, sometimes a developer will grab one high point of information and say, this is the new benchmark. How are you justifying that? Do you actually know which project that is? What kind of co-benefits they're actually executing? What is their financial model look like? So there's a lot of unknown information, so it's very dangerous, or I don't want to use the word dangerous, but uninformed, to grab very individual data points and then try to conclude what an accurate price is. But I do agree with your point that not every project is valued the same in terms of the credits, but the more transparency that you bring up front to a buyer, the more helpful it is to actually have them understand that the valuation is fair, that what you're presenting to them makes sense. A lot of buyers are not stepping into CDR because they don't know what to pay. They don't know how to value the asset that we're essentially utilizing to finance these projects. So I can definitely see how being upfront with them and saying, like, here, these are my costs and all the model that goes into it, and then saying this is my price, because it does add that extra layer of transparency versus other people, especially if they're not like a sophisticated buyer, they don't know, and you just say, hey, here's the price. They're going to discuss internally, be like, okay, well, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah, you said your name's Abraham? Yeah, your question also raised for me what a trend I've been seeing, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is like carbon credit purchases are largely happening via offtake because there's not that many credits produced in the world to be transacting on the spot market. And so the transaction ends up looking sort of like a financing transaction because of the volume of credits, the risk that the buyer or investor is taking, and then also just the fact that this is a really new market. So the diligence in some of the conversation you were describing, Abraham, I think plays really well when someone's like they're pre-purchasing CDRs, but they're also sort of like helping you finance your project to some extent. Do you agree with that, or do y'all agree with that? And how are you seeing that play out right now?
I'll just hear what.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, like our goal is not to sell to an end buyer. Our goal is to sell to commodity trading houses.
Oh, interesting.
Like we don't think it is traditional or normal for these operators like finance and tech companies to come in and, pay for the ore that becomes the chip that becomes the computer. Like, that's not the role they play. So they're playing an unusual mark in catalyzing early stage. Mm-hmm. As soon as it's liquid and you can price forward then the Trafiguras, the Vitols, the Shell's already active, but they'll come into, Glencore, if you don't know these are large commodity trading houses that trade all sorts of commodities around the world, and I do agree this is an unusual commodity, or what is this, but that once there's a liquid forward price that they can hedge against, and they can come into the market, and they will come in, and then we will use them, the offtake will be financing, and then there will be a liquid spot that less catalytic off-takers can enter and buy the spot credits, and they will pay a higher price at spot because of the time value of money and because of the de-risking.
Sure.
So, you might get 140, they'll get 160 in 5 years' time. Like, it becomes, we're hoping we get to that point, because that's easier for us to finance projects on the scale that we'd like to develop.
No, yeah, I just want to say I agree, and I know that sometimes it's a controversial take for some to say that they sell credits to brokers and traders and not, let's say, an end buyer who is retiring the credits. But I think, again, it's important not only from the perspective you mentioned, but in order to also bring more activity and liquidity to the market and to have more people involved. It's the only way that we're going to be able to scale the market. Of course, you need to increase the underlying end demand because you can trade things around, but if no one's retiring it, I mean, it has no value. But I do agree 100% with what you said, that that's also a strategy to go for, and to incorporate those commodity trading houses in the trade of carbon credits. So, 100%.
Does anybody else have a question? We probably have time for one more. Okay, we have time then to play the impact match game. So I'm going to ask for one brave volunteer. If they think, I'm going to flip through all of these, but if you think that you have a co-benefit and you're open, I'm going to call on a volunteer otherwise. So if you're open to sharing a bit about your project and seeing what questions people have, it could help you in your positioning. Greg, I'm going to call on you. Sorry. I made some severe eye contact with you earlier. Are you welcome? Yeah, no, there is no chance you're getting away. If you're open to it.
Yeah, I'm open.
Let me show you a few of these. So we have soil health and crop yields, cleaner air and public health, rural job creation and livelihoods.
Yeah.
You want to do that one?
Yeah, let's
Circular
do-
economy. Both of those.
Should I stand up or sit down?
Whatever
I'm
suits
gonna
you.
sit here.
Stay seated. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Tell us about your project
All right.
and a co-benefit you're trying to track.
Yeah, okay. Project is, this is in Ghana. We are working with a cocoa producer. In Ghana, all cocoa, Ghana's the second largest producer of cocoa in the world. This is very rural. This community, pretty much the only income currently is cocoa production. But cocoa production is very seasonal, so it's only about 7 months out of the year, 7 to 8 months out of the year, cocoa is produced. So during that time, when cocoa is produced, cocoa is grown. Tell me if I'm talking too much. Cocoa is grown in sort of fruits that are the size of like an American football,
Okay.
If you will. And then the outside of that, they break that open. The beans are on the inside. There's a fruit, and then the outside of that pod is like left in the field to decompose.
Okay.
And so they're going to be making biochar out of the outside of that pod. This is going to be listed on Puro. Timothy knows this very well. So the outside of the pod is left in the field to decompose, and so we are building a biochar facility there to make biochar out of that cocoa pod waste. And so we believe this will be rural job creation. Now we're also looking at trying to also use the facility to try to have another feedstock during the part of the year when cocoa is not being produced, because there's very little income in those communities during the part of the year when cocoa is not produced as well.
Okay.
And so that would be even better. So yeah.
Do you have sources of data of like current employment right now?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Because the cocoa board, and only in Ghana and Ivory Coast is this the case, but the cocoa board, every single person who sells cocoa has an ID number associated with them, and so the amount of cocoa that they sell to the cocoa board is tracked. And because that's sort of the only income, every single person who is selling cocoa, the amount of cocoa they sell currently is tracked.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. Anyone on the panel have any maybe questions for Greg that he should be making sure he's tracking, or poke holes in the case for this co-benefit?
Well, actually, while we're at it, maybe do you want to talk a little bit also about the circularity of your project?
Oh, right.
Okay, we'll just boost him. We'll boost him
because
instead.
I think the project actually fits really well for both. But shortly, like, you're already tracking pretty well the employees, so that's really good, and the people in the field as well. Maybe it's about going on an extra step and going age, gender, etc. Cocoa is one of the biggest. Unfortunately, it employs a lot of child labor, so that could be another layer on just, okay, yes, we're employing people, but it's also obviously not children, etc., and proving it based on that.
And one of the things about this specific project is these communities, it's 8 communities, and they're relatively isolated, and so there's a lot of data that we can track, and it's not kind of like there's a lot of people intermixed, and so you have kind of like a relatively tight set of people that you can track, and there's not a lot of like people coming and going of like who's working and who's not working, which makes it relatively easy to track the information. And you also mentioned gender, and so one of the things that in cocoa they're trying to do is encourage more women to be working in the cocoa industry too. And so part of the idea is that because the cocoa pod husk is left in the field, it can be, the income can be from, even if it's not necessarily the farmer themselves who is bringing the cocoa pod husk from the field, it could be like, you know, somebody else who then carries the cocoa pod husk out of the field, and they get paid to carry it out of the field. So that's sort of part of the job creation idea too. But yes, and then the biochar itself goes back into the field.
Yes. You have a slam dunk a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's this is what we're going for.
But maybe applying to US, and to round it out, I have 1 minute left. Thank you for y'all's patience. Like co-op groups in the US where growers are already part of an organization, so you can track them, are an easy win here because they typically have like data. They also know what's being applied on fields historically. And then the USDA does publish, this is just from my previous life, I worked in row crop ag, like they publish a lot of grower baseline practice behavior. So something that folks can tap into as a public source and then show what they do relative to that instead of commissioning your own study. So and that's kind of your equivalent in Ghana, right?
Well, and the only inputs that anyone has is what the government gives them. So there's massive tracking of any inputs currently put into the field. Yeah. So we'll be able to track any input of the biochar, so additional yields, because the yield is the cocoa itself. So we have very tight tracking of how much cocoa was being produced before and how much cocoa will be produced now with the cocoa, with the added biochar going into the field. So we should be able to understand additional yields coming from the biochar as well. Amazing.
Yeah, input tracking from the government is wild.
Yeah. Well, and what we're really hoping for
tell me
is that is if we can pyrolyze diseased pods and then break disease cycle.
Incredible.
That's one of the things the government's excited about from this project too. Is if we can break disease cycle, then we can. But that's you know.
Thank you for humoring me with this exercise, Greg. Okay, let's give everyone, our panelists, and Greg and Abraham and Sam, a round of applause. I appreciate you joining us. I'm going to flip to this last page. So, as I mentioned, I'm with Offstream. We do all things carbon credit, maximizing carbon credit value for project developers. Thank you to Tim from Puro. I really appreciate your candor. Tim's really a gem at Puro if you haven't had a chance to work with him.
Thank you,
Alex at it's the truth. Alex at Lympha, who I think have actually taken a lot of like the buyer investor journey that we've talked about and Stebin at EcoX for developing a very innovative project. Appreciate y'all joining us.